The ghost village. He stretched his arms, took a big yawn and stood up. He looked around and he was alone. The serenity of the place was unperturbed and his movement was the only noise that could be heard. He picked up his bag and walked slowly and quietly from the very dimly place where he spent the night, passing through small rocks and earth, in a dome-like space similar to a cathedral. Above was the ceiling pavement of rocks where daylight passed through its cracks. As he passed through that long and wide open space, his face was revealed and hidden by daylight. Up and ahead, the alley was narrowing but still wider for him and a score of his kind to pass through. He could hear the creatures of the day, the scent of the morning breeze, and the life outside the deep cave as he neared its edge. He stopped and looked out. He saw thin fogs covering the mountains dissipated. It seemed he was standing on clouds as fogs crept to his feet. Right before him was a very wide horizon stretching as far as his eyes could see. The eastern sky was radiating bright orange and yellow colors. The sun revealed the mountain ranges from afar that were like sleeping animals covered with thick and thin sheets of clouds that were moving slowly to the north. His view of the entire horizon was clear. Under the vast blue sky were stretches of dominant green, yellow, blue, red, dark green and brown patches of the lands below. He could see some mountains where thin white crystal-like lines were streaking down on their sides as the water fell into a wide river traversing several mountain ranges. The view was breathtaking and beholding. He fixed his eyes on the bright-colored patches of the land below, Zerepleter. Far and ahead his sight gazed at the thick patches of a dark green land, Nosnev. He looked up to the vast blue and orange sky once again and saw that it was fine. It was a good morning. He started his descent. The trek downwards was not easy as at times he used the branches of small trees and the sturdy protruding rocks to hold on or at times to hang his body on the mountainsides. He was used to it and his strong limbs made him through those challenges. Each day as the sun began to set he found a cave or just a mere space to spend the night. The nights in the mountain could pose danger to a life that was unprepared for its cold climate and the unforgiving snakes, scorpions, tarantulas added to the risks. However, his blue scaly clothes were quite good to keep him warm and safe. The night view from the mountain was as good as the day and the noises from night creatures seemed like music to his ears. At times he played his own music to blend with nature using a leaf that was always with him. Every morning the view from below was enlarging, revealing what the patches of colors were: trees, open spaces of grasses, small hills, rocks, cliffs, boulders, rivers, and forests. It took 3 days and a few encounters with venomous insects and snakes before he reached the mountain's foot. He saw a beautiful waterfall ahead and followed its flow till it led him out to an open land where the water flowed out to a small and a clear river. He walked steadily traversing the flat ground until he reached the edges of a hilly forest. The forest was covered with thin fogs as he went inside, studying its surroundings, looking up at times at the high and old trees that some were covered with vines. The earth was filled with nothing but fallen leaves, fallen logs and broken branches as sunlight passed through the thick trees and blended with the thin fogs. He saw animals, deer, boars, bears, squirrels and others, as he got deeper into the woods. Hours passed and the sun was all up. He was deep inside an unknown territory. He trekked beyond until his eyes caught some trees where straight like wooden sticks were embedded. Some were already broken by time. Arrows that failed to hit their marks that rested on the trunks of the trees for years. His heart beat fast, for he knew that he was near to a place that he was told to have been inhabited once many years ago. He walked forward cautiously, going up, going down, and on one of his descending steps, a small reflecting object caught his eyes. He moved towards it. The radiance came from a smooth round crystal-like blue stone half embedded into the earth and hidden in the bushes. He studied the ground and it made him shiver as his feet almost stepped on skeletons of a dead kind that was still intact lying sideways on the ground. It looked like a large cat, almost buried under the earth, as the only ones sticking out were about a quarter of its remains, the others embedded by time under the soils. The cause of its death was still in one piece, lying diagonally in between the rib cages. He looked further downhill and from afar he saw other scattered but headless remains of the same kind. It made him feel cold. He picked up the stones and descended slowly with the old trees standing tall above him. As he was nearing the hill's base, more and more headless skeletons were scattered. Young and adult bones were everywhere, resting on trees, lying on the earth, some holding each other's hands. The woods had become a vast graveyard, forgotten for years. He was nearing the edge of the woods, and when he emerged from the trees, before him were some structures, wooden houses that were almost the same in shapes and sizes from afar. He walked nearer until he was standing on a house. He looked at its walls that were made out of logs carefully piled and tied up together. Its wooden roof was almost gone, for years of abandonment made the house gray and its floors filled with dirt and thick dry leaves. He moved and went up the stairs to its door, and every step he made created squeaking sounds as if the house was going to fall apart. He peered inside through its windows and it gave him the view of the entire living room. Wooden stools, chairs and tables, were still neatly placed on a floor filled with dirt and some debris. Spider webs filled the ceiling and the corners. He pushed its small door. It squeaked, then gave in, dropping flat onto the floor, creating dusts and a noise that echoed into the quiet woods. The wooden walls on one side of the house also collapsed, revealing a room where a bed, a small cabinet and a chair were resting. Time made its wood soft and almost empty inside. He moved away, turned back and looked at the other houses and wondered how beautiful the village was. Each house was equidistant apart and almost the same in size and shape. He walked on a pathway, an alley where on each side were the remains of other houses. In between the houses, he saw trees which branches extended out and up like a fort, but filled with so many uncanny leaves, and each of the trees was almost the same in height and girth. He knew what they are. At the end of the alley he saw sparkling waters ahead. He walked towards it, and before him lay a large and a beautiful lake. Its waters reflected the vast blue sky, and it was filled with life, animal life, insects, diving birds, bees, butterflies, who were all busy and oblivious of its past. He looked to his left, and the equidistant trees with fork-like branches dominated his view. In between them were the remains of burnt or destroyed structures. He fixed his gaze on the other side of the lake, and the view was almost the same, except for some deer that wandered on its banks. He moved to the edge of the lake until his feet almost touched its waters. He stopped and gazed at it. Fishes were swimming. There was life, except that he was standing in the middle of an empty village. He knew what had happened. He was told about it. And now, right before his eyes, he was there, a living witness to the wrath of the past. He sat at the soils and took out from his bag a sealed water container which shape followed its contents inside. A leaf came with it falling onto the ground. He looked at the trees with fork-like branches once more as he picked up the leaf that fell from his bag. It was the same leaf as those in the trees. He smelled his leaf that bore a unique fragrance and placed it onto his palm. Gently he blew it out to the air and watched as the leaf danced gracefully and dropped onto the lake, floating like a feather. He stared as it drifted away as his eyes gazed at it, but his mind was thinking another thing. He touched his wound. It had not completely healed. His experiences opened his mind to the realities outside the world he once lived, where he was at peace, that he once became part. There was no turning back now. He had gone farther than he thought. He did not expect to be in the place told by stories, and he wondered what kind of lives he would meet next in his journey. Would they be as brutal as the others? Would he be lucky this time? Or would he be part of the statistics of evilness, greed and mercilessness of the others? Finding the answers to his personal questions brought him to places where death and violence abound. He asked himself how worthy it was to leave a fine place just to seek for something that he was unsure of finding. It was not so long since he journeyed to the west. It has not been so long that he was once a peaceful and a caring kind. But he felt hundreds of years had already passed, and nature and circumstances made him to what he had become. He took some lives away. He killed a few to survive. Since he never had a good sleep, he was haunted by the thoughts of those lives he ended with his hands. He wished he was just dreaming. He wished that everything would be the same as it was. He wished he was the same as he was. He was deep in thought and did not notice that on the other side of the lake dark red pairs of eyes were watching him.